In 1980, when all the conservation system units were established, there were a lot of small mines already in place, guiding operations, that type of stuff, and there's recognition of prior existing rights. So we have some of the only wild and scenic rivers in the country that still have active placer mining going on, for example, in the 40 Mile. In the Steese, there's guiding operations for hunting, winter recreation, dog mushing, snow machine tours, and that type of stuff. So people using that land to make their living is an important part of what we have to manage for. And then a sort of unique piece of the economy is the subsistence lifestyle. People who depend on the resources of the land for their food, heating, fuel, access to those resources is also an important piece that we have to manage for, and just puts a little bit different spin on managing a national conservation area or a wild and scenic river corridor than might be the case in other parts of the country. Two really important things to understand about the ecology here is permafrost is an essential part of the system and fire is an essential part of the system. And climate change has major effects on both of those. Permafrost melts the physical structure that supports the ecosystem, keeps water at a certain level, controls groundwater hydrology, surface water hydrology in many cases, keeps riverbanks stable, slopes stable. That's all at risk. And there's examples all across the state of that happening. But in particular along Birch Creek in the Wild and Scenic River Corridor, it's contributing to water quality concerns in the Wild and Scenic River. The permafrost is a critical piece of the ecosystem and obviously affected by warming temperatures. The other piece of fire in the ecosystem, this has always been a fire-dominated ecosystem. We have a high active fire regime in interior Alaska, but it's increasing the number of fires, the frequency of lightning starts, the frequency of lightning in general is increasing with climate change, and the ecological effects of fire, it's burning deeper into the duff layer. Effects are happening later into the fire season. In the past, we haven't seen as severe of fire effects.
It happened to be a really wet fall, and the caribou herd had been growing. And with the caribou came the hunters. The week before the hunt opened, they announced a really large hunt quota. And with that, it brought a huge horde, if I can call it that, of hunters out the Steese Highway for opening day. And the wet weather and everybody riding around on their OHV combined with low clouds on the ridge just was a perfect storm. The trail on first day had been used by people trying to navigate through the fog on the ridge, and the trail markers that we use for hikers helped the people traveling the ridge on their ATVs, and unfortunately it just bombed out our trail. So the footpath and tundra around the trail had been destroyed. There were some, what I ended up calling mud pits, because they were hundreds of feet wide, hundreds of feet long, that were just ruts of mud and mud. So what had been just this beautiful tundra mat filled with moss and lichen and beautiful wildflowers and some dwarf shrubs next to the trail had just become this muddy mess. And there was a lot of public outcry to us, to hunters, to the state as well, as we were trying to figure out what was going on and how to solve problems. We immediately formed a stakeholder group that helped us throughout the process and still heavily engaged in working with the trail. And that's been, I think, really key to seeing the trail repair happen quickly within a year. We brought our partners in to help us figure this out. We have partners up at the University of Alaska and nonprofits. The Salta Delta Soil and Water Conservation District were very helpful. So we were very worried about not just the vegetation, but the tundra up there has permafrost underneath it. So The system can be easily disrupted, the hydrology of the area, if things change. So we needed to get something that would grow fast. Annual rye was recommended because it would grow fast, but it would die off eventually. It wouldn't compete with the native vegetation as those native plants started to grow back in. And what we're seeing now is exactly that. The rye fell over and it's creating this nice, bright, almost white light over that dark mud, and so it's reflecting a lot of the light.
The need arose for us to develop this technology that we're using because we have a lot of problems with permafrost thaw and degradation. We see it with infrastructure, roadways, systems and buildings. They're collapsing. We have a lot of issues with that as far as the cost associated with that. And so what we wanted to do was to develop a simple method that we can use all over Alaska, Canada, wherever there's permafrost, that we can install quickly. We can put it in the ground and it'll tell us all the information that we need to know about what is going on under the surface of the ground. So we have just very simple temperature probes. That's all they do is measure temperature. Things just kind of got moving pretty quickly, and so I had a lot of support from the field managers at the field office that, yeah, they were responsive. They answered all my questions quickly, and they kind of helped guide the process along too. So it was a really good collaborative effort. I think we didn't have any snags or anything like that happen. We just had to go through the right avenues and get to work on the project right away.
BLM's AIM program, the Assessment, Inventory, and Monitoring Initiative, is a really powerful tool to give us a regional baseline to understand how the condition of any site fits into the range of conditions on the landscape. In the past, we've generally, any site we go look at, we have to use informed, educated, best professional judgment to decide, is that in the condition we want, is it changing, what's the trend? But it really doesn't have a context. It's every site is kind of independent evaluation. One of our responsibilities for BLM is to be able to tell Congress and the public what the condition of the public lands is. And when you're looking at every site differently with different people with different backgrounds, different preferences for protocols and what have you, you just can't give an answer to the question, what is the condition of the public lands? The answer you end up with is, which lands do you want to know about? AIM really evolved out of an effort to give us a consistent yardstick, while at the same time recognizing that there are ecological differences across the country. The initial focus was on rangelands in the lower 48, and it's more developed there, but in Alaska, we're taking the same basic principles of sticking to a statistically sound base, using consistent protocols, calibrating teams. So we're using the same yardstick across the country and acknowledging there may be additional stuff we need to measure along with it, and getting to the position where we can answer that question of what is the condition of the public lands in a holistic manner. The flip side of that is we're responsible for looking at individual sites, permitted sites where reclamation has happened, fire scars to see how ecological conditions are returning. Pretty much everything we do, we look at it to determine, is it in an acceptable condition, usually relative to objectives set in our land use plans. And if we just go look at that with no context, you're going to get a different answer than if you collect data and compare it to the conditions across the entire region. And that's the power AIM gives us, is to collect data and compare it to a consistent standard, rather than go look at this fire scar with one team and a different fire scar with a different team, and still with good intention come to different conclusions about how things are returning after the fire, how those might be influenced by climate change or by adjacent human activities or whatever. Making data-based decisions rather than professional judgment-based decisions is a really powerful tool for getting us on a consistent yardstick across the Bureau.
I am a strong believer in science. I actually have a bachelor's and a master's both in science, and feel that data is really important. That data feeds right into the stories and the messages that I think our public is interested in. As far as management goes, science gives us the confidence, I think, to make sound decisions.
In collaboration with BLM, all the data is accessible and available, so we want to make it, easy for people to access it and as well as understand, what it means.
The current science is telling us that maintaining large intact ecosystems is one of the best ways to build climate change resilience. So fragmentation is a consideration in that, and it's a balance. People need to get out and use the land. You can't hunt caribou without getting where the caribou are. At the same time, if you completely fragment the landscape, you're having long-term effects that are detrimental to the ability to get out there and use the land and the resources that you want to get out there for. The other piece that we have to consider is there's a whole range of desired recreation experiences out there. Some people want to go recreate where they don't hear an engine at all. They want a hiking experience in the backcountry. Other people want to go recreate where they can bring all their buddies in their ATVs, and that's two ends of the spectrum. We need to consider whether it's possible to meet the needs of everybody within that spectrum. And it's probably a fantasy to say we can meet everybody's needs, but we certainly make an effort to meet a wide range of needs and find a place where most members of the public can find the experience they're looking for. We also have increasing populations, again, increasing technologies, letting people get out farther and farther in the country. And we're not going to have the opportunity to just shut everything off. These aren't closed lands. They're here for people to use. But we are in a position where we can make decisions that take that into consideration as we manage public use of the lands and figure out how to get people on the landscape while acknowledging the value of those large intact chunks. Our legacy needs to include the condition of the public lands that we pass on to the next generation of public land managers and public land users. We really need good science about how those systems are changing, both natural science for the ecological piece, social science for the recreation and economy piece. And with the science plan, I'm hoping we can set up a structure where we can do better outreach to both the natural and social science community and have a better infrastructure for pulling that all together to understand what the outcome of management decisions may be as we move into this less certain future.